Last week, I spent some time sharing about our session decision about the continuing decision to suspend in-person worship. I mentioned how hard that decision was for us, particularly in the season of Advent and Christmas. We recognize how much gathering in person is part of our spiritual lives during this season, and that is being taken away from us by this pandemic. Kylie Wenberg, who is our parish associate, reached out and asked if she could share some ideas with the congregation based on her training as a spiritual director and her study of Christian spirituality, and how that might relate to us being able to celebrate Advent and Christmas in this strange time. So I'll now turn things over to Kylie Wenberg.
All right. Good morning. I'm going to start in maybe a surprising way and tell you about Mother's Day this May. My husband and my kids bought me a new mixer, a really nice KitchenAid one, and I will acknowledge that it's a kind of a risky thing to buy a woman a mixer in this day and age with political correctness and all, but the thing is, my old one, an old Sunbeam one, I'd had since we got married 22 years ago, and so it had stopped working and I really needed a new one, and so I was thankful for their gift. Except it was tan, and I really wanted white. And this new one had all these bells and whistles. When I opened the package and saw the parts and the extensive owner's manual, I was tempted to say, oh, forget it. This is going to be too hard. Who needs foods that require a mixer anyway? So, I'm going to tell you how that story ends in a minute, but first I got to say a few other things. Last Sunday, you all know that Greg and Damon spoke heartfelt pleas to our church family to encourage us to stay the course with the directed health measures, the staying home, wearing masks, all of that. Greg spoke from science and data and church polity. Damon spoke from scripture and a sense of spiritual call. And from the comments on the Facebook feed, I can tell that their words landed well, helping us as a church family to feel ready and willing and able to do what we can to be part of the solution to this virus by living in a spirit of lovingly putting others before ourselves. And I was thinking about that, and then I had a realization. I realized that a person can be fully on board with the directed health measures and committed to following them and still feel lonely, isolated, and depressed. I realized that a person can be totally in agreement with the session's decision to keep the church closed down and still feel more and more distant from God as the months of worry and grief drag on and on. And then I also realized that this time of increased solitude is the perfect time for us people of faith to be learning new ways of connecting with God. And the more I thought about it, the more excited I got, and the more I came to see that God is offering us in each moment of this pandemic the very things we most need. It's just that we may not be equipped yet to be able to receive those gifts because they're coming to us in different ways than they used to, and that's why I'm here today. I want to offer what I see as the next step in the spiritual conversation that Greg and Damon began last week. We are all now on board. We are totally on board with staying home, wearing our masks, doing all that. But our familiar spiritual practices are absent. And this is a uniquely difficult time. Most Christians, perhaps many of you listening right now, have as their primary way, if not exclusive way of connecting with God, to be Sunday worship. Our pastors and staff have been doing, and volunteers, have been doing an amazing job of bringing to us worship as best they can, but it's not the same. Worshiping alone is different. Experiencing uncertainty, stress, and grief for months on end is different. While we may think of these differences as disappointing and even hopeless at times, God is ready and able to transform them into opportunities for growth. Whether we need strength, inspiration, hope, a sense of security, connection, our God is able to provide those abundantly and is constantly offering these very gifts even in the midst of this pandemic. The problem is We keep wanting white, but we got tan, if you know what I mean. We want to worship God in the color that we like best, the in-person worship, and we don't have that right now. And furthermore, since that in-person worship stuff is not available in the same way right now, we're going to have to learn something new to live into God's gifts in this particular time. Now, eventually, I did go ahead and invest some time and effort and learned how to use my new mixer, and in so doing, I was rewarded with new capabilities, new options. And similarly, if you and I invest just a little bit of time and effort to learn some new spiritual practices, there's no guarantee, but I would say we're almost certain to be rewarded with increased awareness of God. And we may even find this crazy, yucky time of pandemic to be a time of spiritual growth rather than spiritual desolation. Well, you may be saying, that all sounds good, but I don't know any new spiritual practices. What am I supposed to do to receive God's good gifts in new ways? Well, don't you worry, I'm not going to leave you hanging. Every week or so from now, until we are back together in this beautiful sanctuary worshiping together, I'm going to be coming to you once a week with what I'm calling 5 for 5s. Each week there will be a new spiritual practice, maybe a new way of praying, maybe a new way of looking for or thinking about God, maybe a new way of connecting with God through other people. Whatever it is, I'm going to challenge you to spend at least 5 minutes a day, at least 5 days a week, practicing this new skill. That's not hard. 5 minutes a day, 5 days a week. Anybody can do that. And it's going to be fun because we're going to all be doing it together. Apart, of course, but together in spirit. And so, each one of these is going to be designed to set a tone for the day. So I'm going to encourage you to set aside your 5 minutes at the beginning of the day. You'll do your praying or reading or whatever. And then that will hopefully set your mind and heart to be thinking along those lines the rest of the day. And of course, if you're a night person, you can do your 5 minutes at night and set your tone for the following day. Whatever works. We know that Scripture reassures us that nothing can separate us from the love of God, but the worries and heartbreak, the stress, the fear that we're experiencing, for many people have created a sense of spiritual desolation, that heaviness and gloominess you've been feeling. But we don't need to despair, because our God is offering us precisely the gifts that we need in this new time. We just need to learn new ways to receive them, and we're going to do that together just 5 minutes a day. So, to close, I'm going to now bring to you your first 5 for 5 challenge. Are you ready? Hi, I'm Kylie, and I'm here with your first 5 for 5 challenge for the first week of Advent. Hopefully you have a devotional booklet like this. If you don't, call the church. We'll get you one right away. All right, so when you sit down for your 5 minutes each morning this week, what I want you to do is begin with a quick little prayer, reminding yourself, why am I doing this? You can do that very simply by saying, God, I need you now more than ever. Teach me to find you in new ways. Then you'll take out your handy-dandy devotional book, open it to the prayer of the day, and read that prayer. So far you've spent maybe 1 minute. For your remaining 4 minutes, here's what I want you to do. You're going to start by trying to figure out what characteristics of God were implied by that prayer. Does it suggest an understanding of God who's generous, powerful, forgiving? Once you've discerned a couple characteristics of God that are expressed by that prayer, try to think of at least one time in your life that you've experienced God in that way. And then simply commit yourself to looking for God acting in that way in your life the rest of the day. Simple. Remember, what we look for in life, we tend to find. So this week, let's look for God.